What is up, fight fans? Let's talk about Jon Jones because I, for one, am a little sick of hearing his name. We're hearing the name of a man who doesn't fight. He's not a fighter. At this current stage, he's not an active fighter. Yes, he's a UFC heavyweight champion. Yes, he's one of the greatest combat sports athletes to ever live. Yes, he's ranked number three on the men's pound for pound rankings. But I know there's a big but. Jon Jones is one of the least active fighters on the roster today who still, holds a guaranteed headline spot. My issue is with Jon Jones is that he is no longer ambitious and arguably rightfully so. Why, he's fought a who's who of the best fighters to have lived at 205. And now that's a big one. At 205, he's fought a who's who of some of the best fighters to live. Let's just look down his record. His record sits at 27 1 and 1 with that one no contest being against Daniel Cormier and the one loss, obviously, the DQ to Matt Hamill. But from February the 5th, 2011, he went on one of the most legendary runs in the UFC. He beat Ryan Bader. He beat Mauricio Shogun Rua to win the light heavyweight championship and become the youngest ever, and still remains the youngest ever UFC champion. Then beat Quinton Jackson. Then beat Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, Daniel Cormier. Stepped away from, well, stripped of the title. Came back, beat Ovin St. Preux. He beat Daniel Cormier again, but that was overturned. Then he beat Alexander Gustafsson. Then we go into the Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes fights. Then he stepped away from the sport, and let's be honest, he stepped away from the sport. There's no denying it. Um, my good friend and former co-host of the MMA Sucker podcast, Tim Wheaton, had a thing to say. Jon Jones put a tweet out there, um, essentially saying, I guess there was a video that resurfaced recently of me saying that after Stipe, Francis would be the only fight I was interested in, blah 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 blah. Tim rightfully put, the thing is that in the amount of time that you've been talking about fighting heavyweights, you could have fought Ngannou, Stipe, Gane, Alex Pereira, and Tom Aspinall. What a great take that is. See, my issue with Jon Jones is that he had the three fights at light heavyweight. He was clearly burnt out. That fight against Dominic Reyes, I thought he won very, very, very narrowly. I'll put my link down below to my rescoring controversial decisions of that fight, and that is a full explanation of why I think he won that fight. But he was clearly burnt out. Take some time away from the sport. That's absolutely fine. Don't hold the belt hostage like he did for a long time. Um, he still regards himself as the best 205 on the planet. Well, if you are, go back down. But we won't ever see that. Like I said, my issue with Jon Jones is the burnout is inevitable. He had fight after fight after fight after fight after fight. In and outside of the octagon, his life was chaos. But he took 1,120 days to move from light heavyweight, where he last competed at light heavyweight. 1,120 days later, he competed at heavyweight against Cyril Gane, who is a favorable matchup for him, who'd just been out wrestled by Francis Ngannou, someone who is not a wrestler. A guy who, to me, it looked like Gane didn't want to be in there, and a guy that is a very good stylistic matchup for someone like Jon Jones. Now you compare that to Jones's great rival, bitter rival, Daniel Cormier. Cormier moved up from light heavyweight to heavyweight, took on a prime Stipe Miocic, and did so with a 168-day gap in between those two fights. 168 days. And not only did he do this, but he did it against a prime Stipe Miocic and knocked him out in the first round. So for context, Stipe Miocic at the time was on a tear. He beat, he knocked out Fabricio Verdum in the first round. He knocked out Alistair Overeem in the first round. He knocked out Junior Dos Santos in the first round. He became the first person to beat Francis Ngannou in the UFC and did so in dominant fashion. And with that win, broke the record for the most consecutive UFC heavyweight championship title defenses with just three. Then he was knocked out by Daniel Cormier. Granted, he then rebounded, knocked out Cormier, then went to a decision with Cormier, then obviously was knocked out by Francis Ngannou. But for me, the issue with Jon Jones is that he's not an active fighter. He's clearly there for the. He's clearly only in the company now for the money fight against Stipe Miocic. But I think now, he wants to cement his legacy at heavyweight by beating the most successful heavyweight of all time on paper. But for me, the UFC and Dana White, because Dana White is the one that's pushing the fight between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. For me, that fight is the epitome of a fight that I'd say three people want. Stipe Miocic wants it, Jon Jones wants it, and Dana White wants it. I think you'd struggle to find many more people than those three people. And of course, the people in and around those camps. Stipe Miocic has not competed since his knockout loss at the hands of Francis Ngannou. That was on the 27th of March, 2021. Today, when I'm recording this, Wednesday, the 21st of August, 2024. That's 1,243 days out of the octagon. 3 years, 4 months, and 25 days, or 40 months, almost 41 months. He's without a win. His last win came on the 15th of August, 2020, almost 4 years to the day. 4 years and 6 days ago, he's recorded the last time he had his arm raised in the octagon. He is now 42 years of age. He is so far past his prime. It's unbelievable. His prime, I'd say, was when he beat Junior Dos Santos, or maybe when he beat Francis Ngannou. That was in 2018. You could argue his prime was when he beat Daniel Cormier. That's as far back as 2020. And Jon Jones wants to beat, let's be honest, Jon Jones wants to beat Stipe Miocic and ride off into the sun. Jon Jones has now hinted at retirement after he defends his heavyweight title against Stipe Miocic later in the year, which we assume will be in Madison Square Garden for UFC, I think it's 309 on November the 15th. And says he will return for one more fight. Sorry, that's what Jon Jones is saying. With that being said, Dana White said last night after the Dana White's Contender Series that he believes Jon Jones will have one more fight, and it will be against the interim champion, Tom Aspinall. And White also said he's willing to make the fight happen, but of course he's aware and he knows that it's going to be Jon Jones is going to require a gigantic paycheck. And the reason that Jones is going to require such a big paycheck is because he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. There is no, and why would you? Tom Aspinall is a new breed of heavyweight. He's like nothing Jones will have ever come across before, not even in his days at light heavyweight. He's as quick as a middleweight and he hits as hard as any heavyweight ever has. But that's Jon Jones for you. He'll tease the fight, he'll tease the fight, he'll tease the fight, and it probably won't ever happen. And I think what will happen is Jon Jones will face Stipe Miocic in November, in Madison Square Garden, with Tom Aspinall octagon side, and that fight will never happen. Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall will never materialize. And the reason for that is because Jon Jones doesn't want an L on his record to be riding off into the sunset with. The fire went out in Jon Jones long, long ago. We saw against Cyril Gane, an easy matchup for Jon Jones. I think if Tom Aspinall faces Cyril Gane, it's an easy matchup for Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall makes light work of some of the best heavyweights on the planet. Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blades, light work of these guys. Jon Jones doesn't want that. And that's the reason that I don't think the two men will ever face off. Let's not forget, this happens all the time in the UFC. We have Brock Lesnar and Daniel Cormier facing off in the octagon. Never going to happen. We'll have Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall facing off in the octagon. Potentially, that fight will never happen. And it's because Jon Jones is scared of losing to Tom Aspinall. And Tom Aspinall, unfortunately for Tom, will never get that huge. Jon Jones is the biggest fight out there for Tom Aspinall and will be the biggest fight out there probably for the entirety of Aspinall's career because of the name value that Jon Jones holds. You know, Aspinall can he can go on a crazy run at heavyweight, and yet he will never get as big a paycheck as he would. He'll never get as big of a slot as he would against Jon Jones because of the name value that Jon Jones has. And why does Jon Jones have that name value? Because he is widely regarded as the greatest of all time in the sport of mixed martial arts. And that's what makes this discussion and this conversation so interesting. He's regarded as the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. But at the moment, he's not taking, and he doesn't seem to be going to take the most difficult fight out there, which is what he 100% would have done earlier on in his career. That's just my thoughts on Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall, Stipe Miocic, Dana White's comments. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Is Jon Jones scared? Who knows? Like the video, guys. Subscribe to the channel because we've got plenty of content like this all the time. And I'll catch you next time.